I appreciate your time, but you know black liberals go conservative, but black conservatives never go liberal, and there's a reason for that.
And I would
on the side of
debate. I'm so happy about this. Candace Owens, Brexit movement founder and conservative commentator, and Cornel West, professor of philosophy at Harvard University and professor emeritus at Princeton. Dr. West, are the president's policies, let's just focus now on his economic policies, are they helping the African-American community, in your view?
Now, I think that the statistics certainly look good through a narrow lens, so I give him credit in that regard. But we have to keep in mind that on the one hand, you still have grotesque wealth inequality, you have job insecurity, so many people who are working more than one job. We know many people who have withdrawn from the labor force are not counted at all. But I think the problem is, though, my dear sister, is that the president has a language that creates an atmosphere that is so xenophobic against black folk, Mexicans, Muslims. He rarely wants to stay in contact with their humanity. So when you look at the statistics, that's one thing. But when you create an atmosphere and an ambience of xenophobia, it reinforces the polarization.
It's a very interesting thought. Economic indicators can be good, but if rhetoric creates division, the numbers stop mattering. It's like giving a man a glass of water, but constantly telling him he's in the desert and can't be trusted. With such contradictions, how can we expect sincere support?
And therefore, many black folk wouldn't even be able to connect the statistics that look good with the language, the atmosphere that feels so bad. And that cold-hearted, mean-spiritedness is something that cuts very, very deep in the spirit of people.
Have you met him? Have you met him, Dr. West? Ever met the president?
No, I've never had a conversation with my right-wing brother. I mean, you know, I've called him a gangster and a proto-fascist in terms of separation of powers. But he's a human being. He's a human being, and I could, you know.
No, I'm just saying this because, look, you and I don't agree a lot, but I actually really like you. I think I just like the fact that you're out there and you're advocating. I have no problem with it, and I wouldn't call you mean-spirited. We disagree, but I think if you actually were with the president, you might find that you could accomplish a lot together and you could do a lot together. I really believe that. He'll work with pretty much anybody, and that's what I found in my experience. So I'm just throwing that out there, Candace. But there is this tonality issue that people seize on with the president, and they always go back to Charlottesville. They always go back to this S-hole countries. Those are the two things they really seize upon, the travel ban. Those three things probably, for some, just wipe out any other accomplishment. Your reaction?
Well, look, I think the president is doing something different. Definitely his tone is different because he tells the truth and he doesn't pander to black America. He hasn't offered us hot sauce. He's offered us jobs. That makes many people uncomfortable because they're from an era where race hustling is a business. They're used to telling black Americans that they're victims, writing books about victimhood, and that is no longer selling in America. And I just wanted to comment back on saying that xenophobia is something that black Americans are afraid of. Xenophobia means that you have a fear, Mr. West, of foreigners. Black Americans are not foreigners in this country. We are a piece of the American dream. We've earned a piece of this American dream, and we're getting tired of people telling us that we are somehow separate of it. I mean, that's really what I have to say. We're doing tremendous under this presidency. There is no candidate that is offering anything on the left to counter what Trump has offered. They're just offering more rhetoric, more fear-mongering, and unfortunately, time is up on this narrative. We are ready to move on and embrace our futures.
Oh, Dr. West,
go ahead. If I can come straight, I mean, first, xenophobia in the generic sense means the fear of other. And black folk have been other, the enslaved, Jim Crow, and so forth. So if you want the narrow understanding is just foreigner, but it's the other. Those who have been otherized, those who have been marginalized in this sense. But think of when you call my dear sister Maxine Waters low IQ.
She does have a low IQ.
That's vicious.
That's a fact.
You said what?
That is a fact.
Another case of the discussion getting personal. If you have arguments, speak in substance. Why prove your point with insults? This is clearly not an approach that helps to unite people.
If she took an IQ exam, you would find out that Maxine Waters had a very low IQ. And I will push that challenge. It may not be nice, but it is truth.
Okay.
When he calls Brother Colin a son of a bitch, you see, this kind of language is ridiculous.
I have never used that language.
I'm an example of a woman who has been given a second chance in life.
And it's an experience that I never forget.
2 months ago, I was in a prison cell, and I'm in the White House. That's Let's continue to make America great again.
Now, Dr. West, I mean, I don't think they were feeling xenophobia or mean-spiritedness. I think they actually found a president who was willing to work with people who really didn't even like him and didn't think he was probably going to accomplish much. And it got almost no coverage. I think we played it on our show, maybe a few other places, but it didn't get any coverage. What's your reaction to seeing that?
When real achievements are not enough, we have to emphasize the lack of media coverage. I wonder if this is an attempt to elicit sympathy or to hide the fact that the results are still far from the big promises.
No, I think that that's a very important attempt to zero in on this vicious policy in the last 40 years of mass incarceration, punitive attitude.
It is important to note that the problem of mass arrest is not the problem of one party. However, solving the issue requires a systematic approach, not rare gestures of goodwill, as is the case here. Political games continue while people remain in the shadows of the system.
Toward those engaged in various kinds of crimes. I've been blessed to teach in prisons for 37 years. The Raw Way to Step program of just in Norfolk. It's something that has an impact on the ground, and I'd give the president credit for that. It's not as if he has nothing to offer. It's just that the dominant orientation is still tied to what I'm critical of both parties. Because identity politics for me is milquetoast, neoliberal politics that don't talk about corporate power, don't talk about poverty, don't talk about militarism. But the Republicans still strike me as so cold-hearted, mean-spirited, and they're still tied to corporate power and Wall Street and won't hit poverty head-on. But when it comes to prison, when it comes to statistics, I give the president credit for that. But it's still small relative to what I'm looking for. I see it in neither both parties other than Brother Bernie Sanders, but that's another dialogue, as you know.
Bernie Sanders.
Well,
we won't go into that right now.
No, we won't go to that. But I have to go back to this idea of race relations under Obama, which I almost fell out of my chair in the CNN story that came out in October of 2016. They got worse. 54% of Americans said they got worse. Only 16% said they got better. This was at the end of the Obama administration. So as Cornel West said, you had Ferguson, you had Freddie Gray in Baltimore, you had all this stuff bursting out on the streets of America with the first African-American president in the White House, and that healing didn't seem to take place.
Right. Look, at that point, I was on the left. So when Barack Obama first went into office, I was a liberal, and I changed my mind due to exactly what you're saying. He drove this nation apart. President Trump is bringing this nation together because what he is talking about is patriotism. Patriotism knows no sex, it knows no color, it knows no creed. The liberal media can ignore all the work that he's doing in Black America all they want. Every statistic in the world shows you right now that Black support for Donald Trump has doubled, and that is meaningful.
Quite a bold statement, given that statistics are often interpreted depending on the context. But the question is different. If this support is so significant, why is it being emphasized so much? Maybe its growth is exaggerated after all.
And I'm telling you that by 2020, he is going to be the first president to crack the Black vote to the detriment of the Democrats.
Hey, Professor West, do you still do work in prisons? Do you still do it?
Absolutely.
Can I come with you? Can I come with you on one of your
You can come anytime you like. We're going to keep track of the humanity and rich imagination and intelligence of our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated to make sure they have a better chance to keep and make sure that they can unleash their potential. But I say to Sister Candace that I like her independence of mind. I think she's wrong most of the time. I fight for her right to be wrong in that regard. But I would wish that she would have moved.
Mr. West.
Absolutely, but I would have wished that you would have moved further to the left, because when you have a Black Lives Movement under a Black president, it's not going to be a matter of then moving to the right
West,
where they have been using.
Socialism has already been tried in our community. It's been tried via welfare policies and has completely crippled the Black community.
The confusion between socialism and welfare benefits is an old rhetorical device. Socialism isn't just about benefits. It's about a fair distribution of power and resources. But why go deeper when you can just blame past mistakes?
It has completely crippled the Black family via the welfare policies. You know that. So I had to creep all the way to the right. And I have to tell
socialism is power sharing. Socialism is not giving and becoming people dependent on programs. It's power sharing.
Mr. West, I appreciate your time, but you know Black liberals go conservative, but Black conservatives never go liberal, and there's a reason for that.
And I would just add that Wall Street.
I don't know. Black people are complicated. Black people are complicated. We go back and forth.
As Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were you guessing or lying? The day after President Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, "The assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false." The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said, "That is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed." But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this: "Top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel." The next day, the New York Times said this: "Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail." So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests...
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is Mr. Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology, or other resources.
Well, tell the committee which it was. They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what did you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on...
What does some requests mean? How many times? Some indicate requests is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down?
If one side states absolutely nothing happened and the other side confirms there were denials, who is telling the truth here? Such contradictions undermine the credibility of any information coming from official sources.
Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are times...
You didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing, knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This is your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the Secret Service talking. And what a change from absolutely false, unequivocally false to, oh, by the way, there were some times where we didn't give them what they wanted. That's a huge change in 5 days. And the fact that you can't answer how many times you did that, that's pretty darn frustrating, not just for me, but for the country.
I hear your frustration.
Let me ask you this. Were any of those requests denied to President Trump's detail after you knew about the Iranian threat?
What I can tell you, again, I don't know the specifics, is that there are times when we can fill a request. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a Secret Service asset or resource. We can fill that request with locally available assets.
You spoke to anyone at the White House since July 13th?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you talk to?
I have briefed the President and the Vice President.
Talked to the First Lady?
No, I have not.
Talked to the White House staff? Anyone in the White House communications?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to the counter sniper who took the shot that took out the bad guy?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that conversation?
I would not want to reveal conversations that I've had with my employees.
But that's exactly the kind of information the American people want to know. American people who pay your salary.
I understand. This is an ongoing investigation. And
Who's all doing the investigating at Secret Service? I know the Inspector General, but is there also an internal investigation in addition to the Inspector General?
We are conducting a mission assurance investigation internally, yes.
You know what it looks like, Director? It looks like you won't answer some pretty basic questions. It looks like you got a 9% raise and you cut corners when it came to protecting one of the most important individuals, most well-known individuals on the planet. A former president, likely the guy's going to be the next president. Looks like you guys were cutting corners. That's what it looks like to me. Is that true?
When it comes to the security of a former president, such evasive answers sound very strange, especially when you consider that these are the very people who are supposed to provide protection for one of the most recognizable figures in the world.
I am here today because I want to answer questions, but I also want to be cautious.
You might want to, but you haven't answered. I don't think you've answered one question from the chairman, the ranking member, or me. Well, we got a lot of other people asking. We'll see if your record improves, but right now you haven't answered, I don't think, any questions.
When you have all the data but you can't give clear answers, it looks at least strange. Maybe it's not a lack of information, but an unwillingness to share the truth.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.